So whilst I get everyone up on stage, we are very pleased to be welcoming Mike Gips, Principal Global Insights in Professional Security and great friend of the industry, and I think recently an award winner as well in the field. He's going to be moderating our great panel, and today, of course, you have seen before Diego Andreu, Principal Crisis Security Consulting at Control Risks. We're joined by Mark Grantz, Director of Security PNC, also returning for the second year in a new role, so welcome back. Kris Coleman, Red 5 Security, will be on in a moment. Michael Brzozowski, Director Security Operations at CIBC, and William Best, Security Operations Director at Eagle Security Group. And yes, Lee pointed out Kindness Games alumni, Mike Gips, the moderator as well. Mike, can you hear us? Because we're going to start our fantastic mega panel. So whilst we wait for Mike, it'd be nice to get a flavor of how you've seen the day. Mark, obviously you were here last year. What have you felt about the different flavors this year?
Unfortunately, I haven't. I've kind of been pulled a little bit, so I'm probably not the best guy to answer it. And we've got some interesting things going on at work right now, so I apologize. You probably picked the wrong guy. I'll defer to some of the other folks in the panel. I
love it. It's honest, and that's what we need. William, you've been around for a bit on the call. How's it been for you today?
It's been really well. I was surprised. This is my first year attending this, but I had a chance to sit in between other meetings. The FBI behavioral analyst, that was really something to listen to. Something that I can say that I honestly haven't looked at for our current site, and some of the things that we need to, really bone up on. Pulled a lot from that. The rest of the time has been sitting in, listening to the panel. I mean, you really have a lot of depth of experience throughout the day. It was quite impressive.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. Stephanie, in fact, was part of an InfraGuard chapter, which sort of helped us out in Arizona too. So it's a nice combo. So I'm glad you liked that segment. Michael, how's the day been for you?
Like Mark, I haven't had that much time to jump in, but I did get an opportunity to listen to the last session, and what I can say is this is my first year here, but it was very engaging, and I could tell, Diego, you did a great job, but it was really fun to watch the exchange between the panelists, and I know it's always tough to do these virtually, so thumbs up and kudos to you for putting on such a great event.
Well, thanks very much for all your help. I think it's a big topic. Well, let me start off by asking the questions then, because we are assuming with this panel, when we talk about overreach, we are assuming that the last 18 months have turned the security function from the Department of Everything, Department of No, to the Department of Everything, and that security has hoovered up additional functions. So before we refute that, or before we claim that perhaps we need to modernize and hand back some or not, Mark, let's start with you. Is it real? Is that assumption real? Have we hoovered up responsibilities?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's no surprise. Everybody, 2 years ago, a few companies started dipping their toes in the remote work, and it was something as an option. Previous to my position in PNC Bank, I worked with Secret Service, and we didn't have that luxury. That was one of the things that was a bit of a curveball for us when the pandemic hit, and in a lot of instances we were forced to work remotely. But certainly it changed everything. It drew attention to the remote access and the vulnerabilities and risks that come along with that again weren't previously considered, or were considered, but they were such that they were on a small scale. And again, everybody's eyes have been open to that. And again, now seeing it kind of from both sides, from the government side and from private industry, I've got a little better appreciation for the risks. Again, in the government, working where I was at, there was no remote work. You get your butt in. They're not going to let you remote into the security systems at the White House. That's why they're secure, because you can't touch them. So.
And that is a great perspective to have on this panel as well, and we will reflect more on that as we go along. William, let's then expand on this. You know, what additional functions has corporate security gobbled up?
Well, when you send everybody home and the last person standing is security, it gets a pretty I guess it gets broad. I know at a couple of sites, you're the HVAC guy and you're the dog walker and you're grocery shopping. You take on the tasks of gas leak checks and things like that. So it depends on your site, but you really end up being the go-to person for just about everything that's taking place inside of a corporate building. Now, if you go to the residential side, the family, depending on your family, locks in, they're not traveling. You're picking up the duties of everybody that got laid off as a result of COVID. So you have that perspective. I think that our culture of yes, or working to yes, worked out well during the 18 months. I think it's going to be an interesting next 18 months of how we manage expectations and getting us a little more centered and security focused.
Indeed, centered and security focused. And perhaps that's the purpose of this mission creep panel, because maybe you don't want facilities management anymore. Maybe you do want resilience, although resilience was originally someone else's discipline. Michael, it's what new responsibilities specifically do you think we definitely want to keep?
Well, I think William put it really well in saying that from a resilience perspective, I think that really falls into our wheelhouse. Holistically, we are a trusted partner to the business. For all industries. So I think anything to do with the resilience is really important, and at least to have a hand in it. You may not have to be running it 18 months from now, but certainly to have a seat at the table. Now, I think at the same time, there's a lot of things that we've taken on holistically that may not make sense in the future. Because at the end of the day, something has to give. We can't do everything and still provide the same level of service. And again, William mentioned HVAC. While we can support certain functions, we're certainly not experts in heating, air conditioning, and electricity, anything like that. But certainly we can play a hand in supporting those business units, but not be the experts in them.
Indeed, and so there's a dynamic at play, isn't there? Because we have received lots of responsibilities. Maybe we've also received partly the budget for them. So becoming the trusted partner of the new function, if we hand it back, whilst acknowledging the budget is not ours, it's difficult, isn't it? And I wonder if that will lead to a bit of overreach. Diego, what do you think we can sort of hope to know about the coming months here? Because it's difficult, isn't it? Security is forever scratching around saying, please, can I have some, more funds? Now you've got funds, but you've got more responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've seen also is we've seen a lot of people with the funds, with the mission now, but they don't necessarily have the subject matter expertise of that area. So they know security, but they might not know threat intel programs, or they might not know crisis management in a way where it would allow them to actually develop that program internally. So depending on where you are as a security practitioner, the fact that now you have the budget and the mission, it can come as a blessing or as a curse, right? So cross collaboration, whether it's with external partners or internals, it's incredibly important to be able to fulfill those duties, because I don't think that this mission creep, this department of everything, is necessarily new. I think it was just accelerated rather quickly during the pandemic. But now we're at a point where we can pump the brakes slightly, reassess, see what fits, see what doesn't fit. Are we adding value, or are we just getting in the way? And depending on that internal assessment, then we can either proceed to, do that work, or perhaps, say, or have that conversation with the business and say, perhaps we need to hire somebody else that knows about this more than I do. I cannot tell you how many executive protection professionals I know now that they run GSOCs. They were formerly out in the field doing EP, driving, doing residential security, and now they're in charge of developing a GSOC and doing threat assessments and intel programs and feeding that into a very small teams that they have. And a lot of them are struggling, but to a certain degree being successful at doing it. So it could also be a great career path for people that are looking to move within security. If you weren't necessarily happy with where you were, or you were looking to expand your horizons, depending on your own level of interest in security and to move perhaps in a different direction, this might be the perfect time for you.
Perhaps the perfect time. Well, Michael, welcome. Does this capture the debate that we were trying to have? Because I know it's quite a nuanced topic. Overreach and mission creep. Where else do you think, Michael, it may have found itself?
I think.
Sorry. This time I'm looking for Mike Gips.
Oh, there it is.
Thank you. Sorry, I had some trouble getting in. Most of the mission overcreep that I've seen that has been documented in studies from the ASS Foundation and Thomson Reuters stems originally from COVID. So I know you've talked about that, but a lot of monitoring, a lot of temperature checks, health checks. But we've also seen more travel and safety risk management. That's a bit of a surprise. Re-engineering facilities becoming, needing to know a lot about HVAC systems. That's been a complaint that I hear from security professionals saying, I really don't need to have these engineering skills. These are the sorts of things that I can jettison. They also don't want to be necessarily in retail stores enforcing mask policies and breaking up fights and helping incur liability for the organization. So those are sort of at the operational level that we're seeing. Strategically, the research and some of which that I've performed myself shows sort of an equal split in interest in taking on more duties that are extra security and trying to go back to what core competencies are. And the reason for taking on these extra duties is to try to drive value for the organization and to show that the security professional is a valued member and a leading member of the team and has a seat at the table. And a lot of them are sort of afraid to give up these new duties because now they're indispensable. Nobody wants to do these things. I know you've talked about security getting sort of the scut work, but they've also gotten a stronger voice at the table. The research has also shown that security professionals have gained status in a lot, at least in larger organizations. So they don't want to lose that status, but they don't necessarily want to keep the minor responsibilities as well. So that's sort of the way, that's the only twist I put on the very informative comments that have been made so far.
Okay, I like it. Mike, do you want to take it from here? Because I know you had a lot of questions that you wanted to sort of run with.
Yeah, no, thank you for filling in for me. And I'm sorry I had trouble getting into the session. I'd like to hear about the impact that these new responsibilities have had down the line so if you have security people doing things that affect unions, compliance, that raise liability, that change processes, how have these new responsibilities affected that? Maybe Michael, I'll start with you since I cut you off last time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just reassessing priorities. All these things are all equally important to everyone, and when you start talking about things like compliance and liability, that may come in front of a more menial task that we're generally doing, like access control and stuff like that. So I think it's really a holistic, take a step back and look at where are all these functions and deliverables and where they land on the priority list for the organization, not just for the security department, and their level of criticality from an impact perspective on the organization, and potentially, like you mentioned, liability or compliance or governance, if it's a regulated industry. So I think it's that 30,000 view of all the stuff that's been added, because now that's in competition with all of our day jobs in the past.
Yeah, no, that 30,000 view foot is, I see what you're coming from. Diego, do you have any comments, any amplify Mike's thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I think when it comes to mission creep and security professionals, I think most would welcome it as long as it advances the mission of the security department and you have the necessary resources to do so. The challenge becomes when you start taking on additional responsibilities that don't advance your agenda as a department, and then you're being tasked to do so with the same resources that you had, or perhaps sometimes even less. That's where it becomes a problem. That's where it becomes, I think, a negative mission creep, and you start seeing a lot of challenges. But I cannot think of any security professional that wouldn't want to elevate their own position as long as you have the right tools and obviously the right support around it. So I think this is, mission creep is never going to go away. And I say that all the time. It's always been here and it's never going to go away. It's just how do we manage it correctly, depending on our own individual circumstances and obviously the circumstance of who is our employer or our client in this case, and make the best out of it, because it could be a great platform for security professionals to develop themselves and really start working in areas that have natural sort of synergies with security and could advance that mission that we're all trying to achieve.
Oh, that's a great point about the synergies. You sounded like you were, excuse me, articulating a rule of thumb for deciding which duties to keep or jettison. It sounded like there was something coming out of there. Do you have that, something like that, or you or Mark or anyone else on the panel, sort of what is the sort of the one statement they could say you keep the duties if it's X, get rid of them if they're Y?
Well, I don't have a rule. Sometimes I know people don't have a choice either, so you just take them, right? It's survival at some point. I don't think many of us are given options sometimes, but I would just say again, if you're in a position where you can add value and you think that you can succeed because you have the resources, whatever that means, whether it's people, budget, support from your colleagues, whatever it is, then I say go ahead for it, as long as it's going to advance your original mission. Otherwise, then perhaps it's time to look at different options, if obviously if that's even a possibility.
Those are good points. Mark, do you have any further comments on that?
Yeah. As far as the rule of thumb, the rule is somebody always wants more. So that's kind of what you're faced with is security professionals. Again, in my past life, one of the things that fortunately is hopefully in the rearview mirror for a good bit now has been the civil unrest that we faced last year. For my organization or my previous organization, one of the big areas of mission creep was video. They wanted to have that situational awareness of and literally you could see that mission creep on a map. If you looked at our video coverage from 20 years ago around our facilities to where we are now, it just continues to grow. As Diego mentioned, it's fine when there's those demands and that growth, but it has to be supported. Now, again, I was fortunate working for an organization that the business of the Secret Service is to provide security. So, you're not in competing interest with business units that are trying to drive profit or trying to drive marketing or whatever. Everybody is marching to the same drum. You're just looking for your piece of the pie. There's only a finite amount of money within the budget. and you've got to make that that decision, and that kind of comes down to that rule. It's return on investment. What's the threat? What's the business impact analysis, and where can our money most be wisely spent?
It's interesting that you mentioned, video mission creep, because the IT department is one that is, I don't know, the victim of or the beneficiary of mission creep often. And they tend to own or often own security systems. They own the video system, they own access control. Is this a natural colliding point for, okay, who has, ultimate authority over security systems? Is it IT, or is it the security department? Is it the backbone, or the people who actually administer it day to day? Maybe Trey, you want to take that on, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually got me sitting here thinking a little bit about it. I'm not really sure. I don't know that I have a straightforward answer with who takes on the responsibilities. I was still churning over the previous understanding of managing expectations, getting a proper threat assessment, and I was still churning on that. But the impact of morale and either the inability or mismanaging the expectations of the client, or whether you're a corporate or whether you're a residential working for a family. I think that's got to be a major focus of what we're looking at. And I apologize that doesn't fall into the question that you were asking, but that's what was sitting at the front of my head when you called on me at the time. So I'm currently thinking about the best way for leaders to manage expectations into what roles we take, or we continue to take after this crisis or this shift in culture passes. And then how do we hire and mentor our new security professionals coming on, that while we didn't do this 18 months ago, and your expectation of security has been one thing, it's now shifted into another platform where you do need to be a little more of a jack of all trades, or at least to a broader extent. And again, I'm sorry that didn't focus on the question.
No, those are good points. Kris, maybe, do you have any thoughts either on what Trey said, what I asked about, IT and overreach there, and mission creep and security kind of colliding, or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that come to mind here on mission creep, and specifically to Mark's concept of video, right? That's where we were going. And so I think video is an issue, right? I've got a whole bunch of other technological issues here with mission creep. We're getting into vaccine passports. We're getting into cities and perhaps corporate details using video to track vaccine issues, harkening back to contract tracing and connecting video with that. And it's a forensic issue. So I think there's a lot of mission creep in and around technology. To Mark's point, to Michael's question, to Mark's point, who owns that? I don't know that the ownership of that is the thing that should be fairly well established. But I think the question comes in forensics specifically, like how do you recover that video? Who's going to own that video? What's the custodial process with that video? And at any point, do we cross legal lines, and with privacy issues, or with vaccine issues, or contract tasting issues? I think there's a whole bunch of mission creep around technology that hopefully this is something we can as a group and with the other attendees shed a little light on today. But yeah, I think that's where I come down on that. As far as other specific issues, I think we've seen this in other countries, so we're no stranger to this. The Israel and the UK have had these issues in a big way with regard to the surveillance technologies that they originally deployed for counterterrorism are now being used for COVID issues. And where does that fall into the privacy issue? Same with other tracking devices, as I talked about. Do these now turn into corporate risks? have we weighed the risk against the gain, right? We talked about security being a cost center, not always a revenue generator, but we got to bring value. We don't have a choice on the security side. If you're not bringing value and your only cost, you're that much more limited in what your value is to the company. So absolutely believe we need to pay attention to that.
Great points. Are any of you seeing pushback from your staff saying, you know what, we've been put upon, we're expected to man doors, we're expected to, check for safety infractions and take temperatures and all this, and like we're not trained for this. We're taking, we're the only one going to the office, or we're exposed to people with COVID or might have COVID. We're taking all the risk, we're getting all the assignments, and yet we're still paid as security officers. Is there any kind of now we're seeing the great resignation, right? People are saying, I don't really want to do this anymore, through all fields, right? And they're looking at COVID and they're sort of rethinking their lives. Any of that in your industry or among your personnel? Whoever wants to jump in at that.
So I'm happy to take that. I've seen it to a certain degree with security professionals on the ground doing sort of operational security, executive protection, like to a certain degree. I've had comments of, hey, I'm not here to do temperature checks. I'm a qualified insert agency certification, and then it's a shame because at the although I truly sympathize, you're being hired for a job and that's what the client needs, and if you don't like that, then somebody else will take that position, right? So there's going to be somebody who's going to want to replace you. But you mentioned the great resignation, but coupled with that is people are getting hired left and right. One of the challenges that we've seen with our clients is that they cannot keep staff long enough. They bring a junior analyst who they thought they were going to be doing very sort of big picture thinking, creating PowerPoint presentations so they can present to the security director or to the board about the risk associated with their strategy. But now they're in this GSOC doing like COVID tracing for the last 18 months, and they get burned down. They say, I'm out of here. I don't, this is not what I signed up for. I was going to do something else, but COVID hit. And now I've been doing a lot of more entry level work, to use a term. And so we've seen a lot of our clients being challenged with staffing because people quit and then they hire and then they last for a few months and then they quit again. Because they're poached by now maybe a technology giant that's going to pay them X amount and promises them a different culture. So part of that, I think it's this changes that we've seen in people moving around in different companies and security specifically, and this ups and downs of availability of professionals is part of that is certainly this mission creep that now they're being tasked with things that perhaps they didn't think they were going to be doing, but also this now massive hiring spree by companies. I mean, 12 months ago, you couldn't get, if you search security LinkedIn jobs, there was like three jobs in your area. And now there's like, hundreds, literally. So, if you combine that current situation, which I'm sure is going to fluctuate down again at some point, with mission creep, it becomes really challenging to retain qualified personnel. So you have to be very careful that you manage those expectations correctly, whether it's at the sort of higher end of a security department or your entry level, whether at the corporate office or boots on the ground. You have to manage those expectations, and they need to understand that security is one of those. Again, it's always been here and it always will be here. You have to stay flexible. But it's absolutely a challenge. Even within control risk, turnover has been a challenge because of those same issues, right? Especially at the junior rank. So it's certainly a problem.
I think if I could just jump in, and I will agree with everything Diego said. I think he's spot on. I think in our market here in Toronto, We've seen that be especially difficult on the entry level side, just because with the government stimulus over the last 18 months, a lot of people came out of that, entry level security guard level and went back to school. They re-educated themselves. They switched fields. And so now, as everyone's getting ready to go back to work and remobilize, there's just not that many bodies. And I'm seeing that across the board within our market of my peers struggling to find really qualified entry-level folks. We've been relatively lucky because we're on purpose. We pay a premium for our staff just for that reason alone. But I do know that I've had many conversations with some of my peers in the city and in Canada holistically, where this has been a continuous challenge.
I have a colleague who is a very kind of imposing, professional-looking security officer, and he told me that he was stationed at a building, and someone walked up to him from across the street at another facility and said, how much do you make per hour? And he was kind of taken aback, but I guess he told him, and the guy said, I'll pay you whatever, $7 more per hour just to cross the street and work for my company.
Yeah.
And what duties, he's like, and we can even talk about specific duties. I mean, you would never see that. That's unheard of. Well, it's not unheard of now. That used to be unheard of. It's how long is this going to last? I mean, is it lasting as long as COVID? I mean, we don't know how long COVID is going to last. Is this, is this a positive thing? Not that COVID is, or a global pandemic and crisis and, is a good thing. Obviously not. It's awful and we're all struggling with it, but will security come out of this stronger? And has mission creep help show what security can do beyond the task-oriented functions? Sorry, go ahead. Whoever wants to take that on.
I'll go first. And I think it's a double-edged sword like everything else. I think to a certain degree, this mission creep can solidify our value to the organization and get that trust instilled in us. But I think on the flip side, if we overcommit, and we just talked about the lack of resources, the lack of talent, if we overcommit and then we completely misfire, that could have a really tragic impact on our reputation as a security department, as individuals, as an industry potentially.
That's really interesting. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, one of the things, and it's kind of top of mind here in DC, and just because of the time of the year with the 20th anniversary of 9/11, 9/11, especially in my business, wasn't mission creep, that was a mission leap. And everything grew exponentially at that point in time because of the new threats that were kind of unmasked. And I think to a lesser degree, the pandemic's kind of unveiled that as well. But just like 9/11, for better or worse, people's memories, tend to fade. And if you look 2 years ago, this buzz for security and this this investment that companies are doing wasn't there. It was had kind of maintained. It had its little ups and downs, but it was a pretty steady pace. You had individual companies that maybe were the victim of some type of incident that would react, but there was very little driving security as a whole. Now pandemic hits a year and a half ago, everybody has to react to that. Everybody has to react to the new environment, the remote working. And so now there's this big peak again. Knock on wood, we don't have any more pandemics and we put this behind us. But I do see a time in a couple of years probably when things start to fall back. But just like Michael had mentioned as far, and Diego touched on it too, the talent drain is I wouldn't say critical mass, but it was definitely a concern. And again, in my previous position, we were looking for IT folks. And not only were we looking for IT folks in a competitive business market, you got Amazon right across the river that was, building their new East Coast headquarters. Again, I couldn't offer remote work. And oh, by the way, you've got to do a 12-month background check so that you can get a security clearance. And we lost quite a few folks that were very talented, but by the time we got to the offer, somebody else had scooped them up. So I definitely see that being the norm, at least for the time being, especially here in the Washington D.C. area.
Thanks. What about the opposite of mission creep? I've seen cases, and it's interesting that you mentioned 2 years ago, nobody was, overloading security duties. As a matter of fact, you were seeing security getting outsourced or minimized. And at the very beginning of COVID, I distinctly remember, because colleagues of mine were affected, that whole departments or CSOs were exited, and security was minimized, or they got rid of the whole department and just sort of vested it in operations or supply chain or HR or wherever. So they said, we don't need security anymore because there's no physical security requirements. We need to condense. We need to go back to core competencies. That's a cost center. We're cutting it off. How have those? Does anyone have any comments on how those companies have fared? Because there's certainly a good number of them. I don't want to paint anyone in the corner with the question, so whoever wants to pipe up and answer that, feel free.
Take a little bit of a shot at that. When I was working a corporate facility, the ebb and flow, and I think Mark may have touched on it. There is an ebb and flow to this. Security goes to the forefront, and then it fades out a little bit, and it comes back. But I think we're in a position now where if you scratch a little bit deeper, insurance liability, that aspect has played a major role in the need and drive for security, access control. And if you go back to some of the other speakers earlier today, active shooters, people that are, disturbed coming into the workplace. And then the question is, did the company have the appropriate security in place to handle this? I believe now that corporate security specifically, maybe not as much in the residential security, it's required in order to just give the corporation a basic security or safety umbrella from litigation. And without it, then they're just opening themselves up, thus falling apart or falling behind or going away completely, in whatever field they're in.
No, those are good points. I want to address, there's a question here from Sridhar N. We talk about talent drain, but what is the talent we're actually looking for? Concierge, facilities, HVAC. And maybe the corollary question is, if we can't get people to take these jobs, are we willing to accept anybody, for liability purposes, anyone with a heartbeat? Maybe Kris?
Yeah, I've got a couple ideas on that. I mean, when we came into one of the markets, it was California, and one of the major corporate companies came to us and said, build us a better guard force. We did that, and we started at the bottom, and we said, how do we reconfigure the job description within the profiles of the compliance requirements of California? How do we write these job descriptions so they are appropriate, and how do we get better talent? And then we also told the client, like, you're not getting them unless you raise wages, because we're going to bring you a better candidate, and we're going to be able to give them training, and they're going to be an EMT. They're going to be a hazmat specialist. They're going to be a GSOC specialist with these kinds of certifications. But that means you got to pay more, right? Because you can't keep getting more and more out of people with more and more certifications and not pay them more. And what was fascinating about that is we got better candidates. They wanted the training, and they wanted to be compensated at a better training level, and we did that. But the return on that investment from the corporation was that you're going to get better customer service in the hallways, in the parking lots, at the access points, et cetera. And when something does happen, there's going to be a better response or a better responder going to that incident. And they bought into it, and they loved it. And we rebuilt the whole thing. And we actually absolutely demanded that every one of these guards get full benefits. And the client was like, what do you mean? I'm like, listen, you don't get better by just doing the same thing over and over again. And fascinatingly, we had 100% customer satisfaction for that project. And CEO was saying, we've never seen this kind of relationship with a security guard company before. Now, that's, I think, what's got to happen, right? You want better response. You want to go steal the guys from HVAC. You want to go get the cable guy and make him a better person, give him a better wage. Then you got to make the job description better. The job description's got to be accurate. To Diego's point earlier, if they're coming in and being told they're doing something else, that's never good. That's a management issue, an HR issue. But then on the back end of it, I think the people will rise to the challenge if you give them the opportunity and you give them the JD and you give them the training, and then pay them for what they're worth.
Words of wisdom there. I know we're down to just 1 or 2 minutes, but I'd like to give everyone a chance to give their final thoughts. How about we go in order of, we go Trey, we go Mark, Diego, Kris, and did I miss somebody there? So let's see. Did I have Trey first?
Yeah, sure. I think we need to manage expectations. If we're going to take anything out of this, is the security field is changing. Some of the mission creep that's come in is going to stay, and like Kris was saying, and Diego and everybody else, we need to be very transparent with why we're hiring people, what they're going to be expected to do, and to the question that was asked, be very upfront. Is this a boutique security that you're coming into? Is it corporate? Is it a concierge? And don't attempt to bring in quality or people that you're looking for by putting a bunch of fluff and things that aren't of substance in your hiring. And then you manage it, and you provide a fair and, again, transparent hiring process. I think that's probably what I'm taking out of most of this.
A great takeaway. Let's move on to Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of parrot that and what Kris, to me, what I've seen, again, previous life and current life, talent acquisition is massively important. And probably the most difficult thing to me is, you're faced with so many day-to-day, hey, this needs to get done, this needs to get done. When I get off this call, I probably have 10 emails. And talent acquisition and recruiting and hiring is a long-term investment. It takes time, and it's not sexy, and it's easy, unfortunately, to put that away. And that goes with training and improving, but it's something that, if neglected, is, again, as Kris kind of touched on, your employers, especially your good ones, are going to walk across the street and go somewhere else where they're more appreciated, where they're better compensated, and have a more positive work environment. So again, not getting lost in the day-to-day, hey, this needs done yesterday, hey, this is a priority, everything's a priority, I get it. You need to just kind of step back and go, all right, what is the long-term investment that I also need to spend time on, and I need to hold myself to it. And again, talent acquisition, talent retention are at the top of the list for me.
Excellent points. Thanks, Mark. And now my doppelganger, even with a similar background, Diego.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was listening to what everybody's saying, and I think for me, the one thing I keep going back to is, right now it's a great time to join security as a profession. I mean, we're at this stage where people can move, they can participate in different projects that I think historically were not as accessible to them. And with this sort of I think supercharging of corporate security departments to a certain degree, it's a great time to be in corporate security. And if you, as Mark mentioned, if you do sort of take care of your people and you pay attention to talent management and your employees, and you train them and you nurture them, when mission creep does come along, because it will, then you're going to be in a place to succeed.
Excellent. Kris, you get the last word.
Last word. I mean, our industry has historically been, really, really tough, because it's we all came from lives where it was black Velcro and next cool piece of gear, and perhaps firearms or tactical or whatever, and we're now managing groups that need to be developed, right? So I've always been a proponent when in the corporate world that you got to broaden yourself. You got to broaden your employees. You got to give them the opportunities to see and do different things. Mission creep's going to happen. Don't let it become a major cost problem for you as a corporate security entity. They need to be paying attention to privacy issues. You got to be paying attention to some cyber device issues. You got to pay attention to resiliency and response plans. You can't ignore all the other things that happen in the world that are hazardous. It's not always just the bad guy behind the tree, right? There's so many other things that we have to be prepared for. So deal with the creep. DC is its own weird animal. We all know that. There is always something going on that's problematic, but it really takes leaders like they're on this panel to do it right. Appreciate being here.
Excellent summation, Kris. Excellent panel, everyone. Thank you so much. Going to turn it back to Pelham.
Well, thanks very much. And thank you, Michael, for being such a great moderator. And in the audience, we had some fans because, of course, you are a Getting Security Done Kindness Games alumni. So a shout out from the audience there. Please give Mark, Kris, Diego, William, and Michael, who is off screen, a big round of applause for being such great panelists.
Thanks for having us.
I look forward to seeing you in the audience, and maybe at the IPSB in Vegas in December. I might be there. It depends on the entry requirements. You never know. I will see you very soon.
Take care. Thanks all.
Thanks again, Phil.
Thank you.